The candle still burned low as I waited at the table my sons once filled with laughter. Still, I poured their coffee, knowing they wouldn't come. As the cake cooled beside me, the air smelled like birthdays that had outlived their meaning. The same silence they left me in began to sound almost peaceful. That's when I opened the old lockbox and found my husband's note. Change what needs changing. So I did. I rewrote my will, and my sons didn't make the list. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The dining room glowed like a page torn from a glossy magazine. Warm amber light spilling from the chandelier, glinting off polished flatware and crystal water goblets. Eleanor adjusted the centerpiece again, even though she already had. A shallow bowl of late autumn dahlias sat between the place settings, flanked by 2 taper candles burning just low enough to cast soft halos across the tablecloth. 6 chairs stood around the table, but only 4 had plates. 2 of them, directly across from hers, had been added at the last minute, just in case. She smoothed the napkin in her lap, then looked to the clock. 7:02 p.m. The second hand twitched. No calls, no texts, no cars in the driveway. Just the empty hush of a house that had long ago forgotten how to echo with joy. Eleanor reached for her phone again, trying not to seem desperate to herself. No notifications. She set it back down beside her water glass, with a click too loud for the quiet around her. The cake waited on the sideboard, a dense chocolate layer topped with shavings she had arranged herself. The kind they used to fight over when they were kids. The middle slice, hers, already plated. She cut it earlier to avoid crying in front of them, or maybe for a different kind of hope, that someone else might see it and feel guilty enough to join. With careful hands, she brought it over, settled it beside her fork, and took a bite. It was rich, moist, all the flavors she remembered, but it was like eating shadows. Everything tasted flat without the laughter or the teasing. Outside, a car passed slowly, headlights sweeping across the curtains like searchlights. Her breath caught. She waited. It didn't stop. She didn't realize she'd been holding the fork midair until her hand started to tremble. She set it down, the clink against the porcelain loud enough to make her wince. She stood and walked to the window, pulling back the sheer drapes just enough to peek through. Nothing but dying light, wind-curling yellow leaves along the curb, and a row of parked cars that hadn't moved all day. The knot in her throat started to rise again, slow and sharp like a splinter. She turned away from the window and sat back down. The seat felt colder now. The front door knocked once, hard, quick. She startled. For a wild second, hope surged. Then, a voice. "It's me. Hazel." Eleanor got up and opened the door. Hazel stood there in an oversized coat, damp around the cuffs from the misty evening. In her hands, a plastic bakery container. 1 cupcake, a candle stuck crooked in the middle, already lit. "Happy birthday," Hazel said, voice soft but unflinching. "They'll regret this." Eleanor looked at the flickering candle, the chocolate icing gone glossy in the porch light. She swallowed. "They won't," she said quietly. "That's the part that hurts." Hazel didn't argue, just nodded and stepped inside. She placed the cupcake on the table like an offering. They sat together for a while. Neither touched the food. Eventually, Hazel glanced over and said, "You don't have to keep doing this, setting places for them." "I know." But Eleanor's eyes didn't move from the 2 empty settings across the table, the untouched glasses, the folded napkins like silent witnesses. Something in her jaw twitched, but she said nothing more. Hazel lingered for another half hour, made a bit of small talk, helped clear 1 plate, and promised to check in tomorrow. When the door clicked shut behind her, Eleanor didn't move. She just sat, elbows on the table now, arms folded around herself like armor. The candles burned lower. The little cupcake sat in front of her, untouched. The candle still guttering, wax pooling onto the wrapper. The house creaked softly with the weight of silence. She didn't remember putting her head down, but she must have. Her cheek pressed against the cool edge of her arm, the tick of the clock now just a dull heartbeat against the windows. Outside, a car engine revved, then stalled. The candle flickered, Somewhere deep in the dark, a phone buzzed to life, screen glowing face down on the counter. One new voicemail. The voicemail went unheard through the night. Morning crept in gray and sullen. Eleanor woke to the low ache of cold in her bones, her neck stiff from sleeping at the table. The candle had long since died, leaving a hardened puddle of wax beside the cupcake. Still whole, still waiting, like some sad metaphor she didn't have the strength to dissect. She blinked slowly, then pushed back her chair with a dull scrape. The room smelled faintly of burnt wick and sugared chocolate. Her coffee pot clicked on automatically in the kitchen. That smell, rich, bitter, was the first thing that made her feel remotely alive. She didn't cry. Not anymore. Whatever tears had existed for her sons had long since crystallized into something else. Not hate exactly, but something colder, heavier. A sediment of all the times she'd chosen grace and all the ways they'd chosen not to show up. She padded to the hallway closet and pulled down the old fireproof lockbox. It took both hands to carry it, heavier than she remembered. She set it on the kitchen counter and entered the combination, fingers stiff on the dial. 3L4682. The latch clicked. The lid groaned open. Inside, nestled between decades of paperwork, insurance policies, pension statements, a worn manila folder labeled in her husband's blocky handwriting. Will, 2009. She pulled it out with slow, deliberate care, as though disturbing it might stir ghosts. Her name, his, both sons listed equally beneath the assets, David and Marcus. Back then, she still believed balance meant love. She had held to that, stubbornly, dividing everything equally, always trying not to play favorites. She'd convinced herself they'd feel that fairness and carry it forward. They hadn't. 15 years later, David couldn't bother to return her texts. Marcus had sent a half-hearted, hope it's a good one last night, hours after the candle burned out. Neither had visited in months, and both had long since stopped asking how she was managing the house alone. Her eyes settled on a handwritten note paperclip to the final page, John's note, dated the week before his stroke. If anything happens to me, don't be afraid to change what needs changing. She read it 3 times, then once more aloud. Something inside her steadied. She picked up her phone, stared at the missed voicemail for a second, then ignored it. Not yet. She tapped instead on her lawyer's contact. Warren Bell, Estate and Family Law. He answered on the second ring, voice calm and familiar, like a winter coat you only wear when things get serious. Eleanor. It's been a while. I know, she said. But I think I'm ready for an update. A pause, then gently. Ready to tidy loose ends or start new ones. She closed the folder and pressed her palm to its cover like a benediction. Both, she said. Later that afternoon, Eleanor sat on Hazel's back porch, steam curling up from their mugs as a cold wind danced along the fence line. It was the kind of day that couldn't decide between fall and winter, bare branches above, stubborn leaves below, the air sharp with waiting. Hazel sipped her coffee, then tilted her head, watching Eleanor with that quiet, knowing gaze she always had when she was about to say something worth remembering. You ever notice how kindness is a lot like currency? She said, setting her mug down. You invest it, you spend it. Sometimes you give it to people who just hoard it. Never pay it back, but eventually it still circulates. Eleanor didn't respond right away. She watched 2 squirrels chase each other across the dying grass. Hazel leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Sometimes the cleanest revenge isn't punishment, it's kindness, redirected, pulled away from the people who took it for granted, and given to those who know what it's worth. Eleanor turned that over slowly in her mind. Then she nodded, almost to herself. I think I'm done setting the table for people who never plan to show. Hazel smiled. Good. They clinked mugs. That evening, Eleanor returned home to find a message from Warren waiting in her inbox. He had availability Thursday morning. He'd prepare a draft of a new will if she sent updated intentions. She sat down at her desk, flipped open a fresh yellow legal pad, and began to write names. Not just family. People who had shown up. The neighbor who mowed her lawn last summer without asking. The librarian who always set aside new thrillers for her. Hazel, obviously. David and Marcus. She left a blank space where their names had once lived. Not crossed out, just empty. She didn't want to do this out of spite, but she wasn't going to do it out of guilt either. The wind picked up outside, whistling faintly beneath the doorframe. Leaves scattered across the porch like rustling paper. Her phone buzzed again. Another voicemail, same number as the one from last night. This time, she listened. "Mom, it's Marcus. I didn't mean to forget. I've just been swamped. Work's been crazy and Amber's been sick. I'll make it up to you, okay? We'll come by next week. Promise." There was no apology. Just a promise, one she'd heard before. She set the phone down, eyes narrowing. On the yellow pad, she circled the blank space, then drew a neat, quiet line through it. The text came in just after sunrise. "Marcus, promise we'll celebrate soon. You know how it gets." Eleanor stared at it through half-lidded eyes, her body still not fully awake. She was sitting at the kitchen counter, the same place she'd circled his name and drawn that line the night before. The coffee brewed behind her, filling the room with the same bitter comfort. But today the smell didn't land the same. She reread the message. Twice. There was nothing mean in it, nothing overtly dismissive. Just the same polished nothingness he always sent when guilt nipped at his heels. A string of vague warmth, like wrapping paper with nothing inside. She hovered her finger over the reply button. Thought about typing "don't bother" or "this is the last time," but she didn't want to give the text that kind of weight. Instead, she tapped delete. Gone. No trace of it in her phone. No excuse to reread it later and wonder if she'd misunderstood something. She knew exactly what it was. By the time she poured her second cup of coffee, the notification from David had arrived. Not even a text, an email, as if she were a distant colleague or some polite obligation on a to-do list. Subject: Happy belated. Hope you had a nice day. Work's been crazy. Let's catch up sometime soon. No greeting, no memory of her favorite cake, or the porch swing she used to read on with him in the summers. Just the same 4 hollow words. Hope you had a nice day. Eleanor blinked slowly, then closed her laptop. Her throat burned, but the tears didn't come. That part of her had gone quiet. 2 sons. 2 apologies wrapped in excuses, and the same ache they left behind every year. She stood up and walked to the sink, rinsing her mug with trembling hands. The sky outside had cleared into a bright, wintry blue, the kind that made everything sharp and honest. The light stung her eyes as it streamed in through the window. By late afternoon, she had settled into the reading chair by the front window. A novel in her lap she hadn't really started when the doorbell rang. She froze. Not a delivery. Not the neighbor's kids. The tone was different, deliberate, expectant. Eleanor opened the door. "Happy birthday, Miss E," Rachel said, standing on the porch with a bouquet of sunflowers, slightly wilted but still defiantly bright. Eleanor blinked. "You remembered," Rachel grinned. "You didn't think I'd forget, did you?" They hugged, Rachel still hugging with both arms like a kid, warm and loose. Her hair smelled like peppermint shampoo and paint. Eleanor stepped aside to let her in. The house felt warmer already. "I know these aren't your favorite," Rachel said, placing the flowers on the table next to the cold cupcake and the hardened wax. "But they looked hopeful, and I figured hope isn't a bad thing to have around." "You figured right," Eleanor murmured. They sat on the couch with mismatched mugs. Rachel insisted on herbal tea, because caffeine makes me paint like a raccoon on Adderall. Eleanor laughed for the first time in days. "Want cake?" she asked. Rachel brightened. "God, yes!" The 2 of them shared the slice that had waited patiently on the sideboard for nearly 2 days. The icing had hardened just slightly, but Rachel still made a happy noise after the first bite. "Still perfect," she said through a full mouth. "You always nailed chocolate. Remember the summer you taught me how to paint feelings?" Eleanor's fork paused midair. Rachel nodded. "You told me to stop copying what I saw," said, "Don't paint what you're looking at. Paint what it felt like to be there." That was the first time anyone ever told me that my feelings were worth showing. Eleanor looked down at her plate. The cake tasted different now, warmer somehow. Less like regret, more like legacy. "I meant it," she said softly. Rachel leaned back on the couch, legs tucked under her like she used to when she was 10. "You're the reason I became an artist. You know that, right?" Eleanor looked at her. really looked. Rachel wasn't blood. She wasn't bound by obligation. But she had shown up year after year, even through college, even after her parents split, even now, standing in the gap where Eleanor's own sons had once stood. She reached over and rested her hand on Rachel's knee. "Thank you for remembering." "Always," Rachel said. "Family doesn't forget." That night, Eleanor sat back at her desk, legal pad in front of her, pen hovering. She wrote one new name: Rachel Levine, Scholarship Fund, $25,000. The pen lingered after she finished the last stroke. Then she looked out the window. Another voicemail buzzed through, this time from an unknown number. No message. Just a recording of someone breathing. Slow, wet, like they were trying not to cry or trying to hold something in. She listened to it twice, then pressed save. The little cafe on Belmont always smelled like cinnamon and book pages. Part bakery, part library, part time machine. Eleanor hadn't sat at the corner window table in years, but the light fell the same way it always had. Gold through glass, soft on the skin, as though someone upstairs still believed in her. Rachel was already there, tucked into a chair with a sketchbook open beside her latte, sleeves of her corduroy jacket shoved up to her elbows. She looked up and smiled like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment, not just 20 minutes. "I got your favorite," she said, pushing the extra cup toward her. "Half calf, splash of cream, no sugar. You still take it that way, right?" Eleanor blinked, then smiled. "I do." They sat in a silence that wasn't awkward, just full. The kind of silence that holds space instead of filling it. Rachel gestured to her sketchbook. "I started something new this morning. That voicemail you told me about, it stuck with me, the breathing, the pause before words that never came." She flipped the page, revealing a charcoal smear of empty space, broken only by a single curve. A jawline, maybe, or a shoulder. Undefined, but human. "Sometimes not speaking is the loudest thing," Rachel said. Eleanor stared at it, her chest tight. "Yes," she whispered. "Sometimes it is." They talked then about art, memory, the ridiculous way time both collapses and stretches with age. Rachel told a story about a failed gallery show in Portland and how a stranger's offhand compliment about her brushstrokes had kept her from quitting altogether. "You changed my life, you know," Rachel said suddenly, the edges of her voice softening. "Back when you taught at the community center, I wanted to be like you when I grew up." Eleanor laughed, startled by the lump forming in her throat. "And here I thought I was just the old woman who made you clean the brushes properly." Rachel grinned. "That too. But you were steady, and kind, and smart. You didn't shrink around people. I didn't know women could be like that." The warmth between them pulsed, tender, rich, like sunlight on skin long denied warmth. Eleanor sipped her coffee and let it sit in her chest a moment before answering. "I wanted sons who'd grow up at all." Rachel's smile faltered. She blinked, caught somewhere between a question and the grace not to ask it. She didn't pry. She just reached across the table and gently rested her fingers over Eleanor's. The silence returned, and again it held. A sharp chime broke the spell, Eleanor's phone buzzing in her coat pocket. She fished it out. "Warren Bell," she answered, voice low. "Warren, hi." "Just checking in," his gravel-smooth voice came through. "I've got Thursday at 10 open. You still planning to move forward with the updates?" "I am," she said. Her voice didn't tremble this time. "I've made some notes." There was a pause, then a quieter tone. "Understood. And Eleanor? I think John would be proud." She didn't know what to say to that, so she just whispered, "Thank you." When she tucked the phone away, Rachel didn't ask who it was. She just passed her a napkin. "You okay?" Eleanor wiped beneath her eyes. "Yes, better than I've been in a long time." As they walked back to the car, the wind picked up, scattering brittle leaves across the sidewalk in little spirals. Rachel offered to drive her home, but Eleanor shook her head. "I want to walk a little," she said. "Let some of this settle." Rachel nodded and hugged her, tighter this time. "You're not alone, you know." "I'm starting to remember that," Eleanor said. Back at home, Hazel was waiting on the porch steps with a knit scarf wrapped twice around her neck and a paper bag of groceries at her feet. "You look flushed," she said, standing to help Eleanor up the steps. Did someone sweep you off your feet? Not exactly, Eleanor replied. But someone made me remember why they still matter. Hazel studied her for a moment, then smiled. You've still got people who see you, Eleanor. I know, they stepped inside. The scent of old cake and fresh groceries tangled together in the air. As Hazel unpacked the bag, Eleanor glanced at her phone again. No new voicemails, no new messages, but the saved one, the one with the breathing, still lingered at the top of her call log. Something about it itched at her now, like a whisper from a dark corner she hadn't turned toward yet. She clicked play once more, this time with Hazel nearby, breathing, shaky, strained. And then barely audible at the end. Please don't, and the message cut off. Hazel froze mid-motion. Did you hear that? Eleanor nodded, eyes narrowing. Someone's afraid, she said quietly. Then she hit save as file and opened her laptop. The law office smelled faintly of leather and paper, the way permanence always does. Eleanor sat across from Warren Bell's mahogany desk, her purse neatly tucked beside her chair, the manila folder balanced on her lap like an anchor she was finally ready to release. Warren greeted her with a fresh cup of coffee and a patient smile. He'd aged well, gray now, but sharp-eyed. The kind of man who seemed born understanding discretion. You look well, Eleanor, he said, settling behind his desk. Shall we get started? I think so, she exhaled slowly. It's time. But she didn't want to give the text that kind of weight. Instead, she tapped delete. Gone. No trace of it in her phone. No excuse to reread it later and wonder if she'd misunderstood something. She knew exactly what it was. By the time she poured her second cup of coffee, the notification from David had arrived. Not even a text, an email, as if she were a distant colleague or some polite obligation on a to-do list. Subject: Happy belated. Hope you had a nice day. Work's been crazy. Let's catch up sometime soon. No greeting, no memory of her favorite cake, or the porch swing she used to read on with him in the summers. Just the same 4 hollow words. Hope you had a nice day. Eleanor blinked slowly, then closed her laptop. Her throat burned, but the tears didn't come. That part of her had gone quiet. 2 sons. 2 apologies wrapped in excuses. And the same ache they left behind every year. She stood up and walked to the sink, rinsing her mug with trembling hands. The sky outside had cleared into a bright, wintry blue, the kind that made everything sharp and honest. The light stung her eyes as it streamed in through the window. By late afternoon, she had settled into the reading chair by the front window, a novel in her lap she hadn't really started when the doorbell rang. She froze. Not a delivery. Not the neighbor's kids. The tone was different, deliberate, expectant. Eleanor opened the door. Happy birthday, Miss E., Rachel said, standing on the porch with a bouquet of sunflowers, slightly wilted but still defiantly bright. Eleanor blinked. You remembered, Rachel grinned. You didn't think I'd forget, did you? They hugged, Rachel still hugging with both arms like a kid, warm and loose. Her hair smelled like peppermint shampoo and paint. Eleanor stepped aside to let her in. The house felt warmer already. I know these aren't your favorite, Rachel said, placing the flowers on the table next to the cold cupcake and the hardened wax. But they looked hopeful, and I figured hope isn't a bad thing to have around. You figured right, Eleanor murmured. They sat on the couch with mismatched mugs. Rachel insisted on herbal tea, because caffeine makes me paint like a raccoon on Adderall. Eleanor laughed for the first time in days. Want cake? She asked. Rachel brightened. God, yes. The 2 of them shared the slice that had waited patiently on the sideboard for nearly 2 days. The icing had hardened just slightly, but Rachel still made a happy noise after the first bite. Still perfect, she said through a full mouth. You always nailed chocolate. Remember the summer you taught me how to paint feelings? Eleanor's fork paused midair. Rachel nodded. You told me to stop copying what I saw. Said, don't paint what you're looking at. Paint what it felt like to be there. That was the first time anyone ever told me that my feelings were worth showing. Eleanor looked down at her plate. The cake tasted different now, warmer somehow. Less like regret, more like legacy. I meant it, she said softly. Rachel leaned back on the couch, legs tucked under her like she used to when she was 10. You're the reason I became an artist. You know that, right? Eleanor looked at her. Really looked. Rachel wasn't blood. She wasn't bound by obligation. But she had shown up year after year, even through college, even after her parents split, even now, standing in the gap where Eleanor's own sons had once stood. She reached over and rested her hand on Rachel's knee. "Thank you for remembering." "Always," Rachel said. "Family doesn't forget." That night, Eleanor sat back at her desk, legal pad in front of her, pen hovering. She wrote one new name: Rachel Levine, Scholarship Fund, $25,000. The pen lingered after she finished the last stroke. Then she looked out the window. Another voicemail buzzed through, this time from an unknown number. No message. Just a recording of someone breathing. Slow, wet, like they were trying not to cry or trying to hold something in. She listened to it twice, then pressed save. The little cafe on Belmont always smelled like cinnamon and book pages. Part bakery, part library, part time machine. Eleanor hadn't sat at the corner window table in years, but the light fell the same way it always had. Gold through glass, soft on the skin, as though someone upstairs still believed in her. Rachel was already there, tucked into a chair with a sketchbook open beside her latte, the sleeves of her corduroy jacket shoved up to her elbows. She looked up and smiled like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment, not just 20 minutes. "I got your favorite," she said, pushing the extra cup toward her. "Half calf, splash of cream, no sugar. You still take it that way, right?" Eleanor blinked, then smiled. "I do." They sat in a silence that wasn't awkward, just full. The kind of silence that holds space instead of filling it. Rachel gestured to her sketchbook. "I started something new this morning. That voicemail you told me about, it stuck with me, the breathing, the pause before words that never came." She flipped the page, revealing a charcoal smear of empty space, broken only by a single curve. A jawline, maybe, or a shoulder. Undefined, but human. "Sometimes not speaking is the loudest thing," Rachel said. Eleanor stared at it, her chest tight. "Yes," she whispered. "Sometimes it is." They talked then about art, memory, the ridiculous way time both collapses and stretches with age. Rachel told a story about a failed gallery show in Portland and how a stranger's offhand compliment about her brushstrokes had kept her from quitting altogether. "You changed my life, you know," Rachel said suddenly, the edges of her voice softening. "Back when you taught at the community center, I wanted to be like you when I grew up." Eleanor laughed, startled by the lump forming in her throat. "And here I thought I was just the old woman who made you clean the brushes properly." Rachel grinned. "That too. But you were steady, and kind, and smart. You didn't shrink around people. I didn't know women could be like that." The warmth between them pulsed, tender, rich, like sunlight on skin long denied warmth. Eleanor sipped her coffee and let it sit in her chest a moment before answering. "I wanted sons who'd grow up at all." Rachel's smile faltered. She blinked, caught somewhere between a question and the grace not to ask it. She didn't pry. She just reached across the table and gently rested her fingers over Eleanor's. The silence returned, and again it held. A sharp chime broke the spell, Eleanor's phone buzzing in her coat pocket. She fished it out. "Warren Bell," she answered, voice low. "Warren, hi." "Just checking in," his gravel-smooth voice came through. "I've got Thursday at 10 open. You still planning to move forward with the updates?" "I am," she said. Her voice didn't tremble this time. "I've made some notes." There was a pause, then a quieter tone. "Understood. And Eleanor? I think John would be proud." She didn't know what to say to that, so she just whispered, "Thank you." When she tucked the phone away, Rachel didn't ask who it was. She just passed her a napkin. "You okay?" Eleanor wiped beneath her eyes. "Yes, better than I've been in a long time." As they walked back to the car, the wind picked up, scattering brittle leaves across the sidewalk in little spirals. Rachel offered to drive her home, but Eleanor shook her head. "I want to walk a little," she said. "Let some of this settle." Rachel nodded and hugged her, tighter this time. "You're not alone, you know." "I'm starting to remember that," Eleanor said. Back at home, Hazel was waiting on the porch steps with a knit scarf wrapped twice around her neck and a paper bag of groceries at her feet. "You look flushed," she said, standing to help Eleanor up the steps. "Did someone sweep you off your feet?" Not exactly, Eleanor replied. But someone made me remember why they still matter. Hazel studied her for a moment, then smiled. You've still got people who see you, Eleanor. I know, they stepped inside. The scent of old cake and fresh groceries tangled together in the air. As Hazel unpacked the bag, Eleanor glanced at her phone again. No new voicemails, no new messages, but the saved one, the one with the breathing, still lingered at the top of her call log. Something about it itched at her now, like a whisper from a dark corner she hadn't turned toward yet. She clicked play once more, this time with Hazel nearby, breathing, shaky, strained. And then barely audible at the end. Please don't, and the message cut off. Hazel froze mid-motion. Did you hear that? Eleanor nodded, eyes narrowing. Someone's afraid, she said quietly. Then she hit save as file and opened her laptop. The law office smelled faintly of leather and paper, the way permanence always does. Eleanor sat across from Warren Bell's mahogany desk, her purse neatly tucked beside her chair, the manila folder balanced on her lap like an anchor she was finally ready to release. Warren greeted her with a fresh cup of coffee and a patient smile. He'd aged well, gray now, but sharp-eyed. The kind of man who seemed born understanding discretion. You look well, Eleanor, he said, settling behind his desk. Shall we get started? I think so, she exhaled slowly. It's time. From Marcus. Just 2 words. Are you safe? The knock came just after 3. Sharp, then again, softer. Like someone unsure whether they wanted to be let in or let go. Eleanor dried her hands on the dish towel and peered through the side window. Her breath stilled. Both of them. David, arms crossed, shoulders stiff under a bomber jacket that looked a size too young for him. And Marcus, hands jammed in his coat pockets, staring at his feet like they might offer better answers than she would. She didn't move at first. Let them wait. Let the silence seep in. Then slowly she opened the door. Neither smiled. David spoke first. Hey, Ma. Marcus echoed it, quieter. Hey. They stood awkwardly on the porch, 2 grown men who had once run barefoot through this yard, yelling about fireflies and flashlight tag. Now they looked like strangers at a funeral. Eleanor stepped aside. If you're here to shout or make demands, the door closes behind you. David blinked. No, we're just worried. She tilted her head. Marcus stepped in. You've been distant. Distant, Eleanor echoed, arching a brow. She shut the door behind them with a click that sounded a little like judgment. You mean decisive? David looked over at his brother, some unspoken cue passing between them. The kind they used to use when sneaking candy behind her back. We just want to talk, he said. Eleanor walked into the living room and sat. She didn't offer coffee, didn't offer warmth. She gestured for them to speak. The men stayed standing, shifting weight between legs like kids caught in a lie. Marcus started. We got a message from a number that wasn't yours. Said something about changes, about the will. Her face remained calm. David took over, voice more pointed. Look, we're not here to fight, but we're family, and you haven't exactly been answering calls. Then there's Rachel and Hazel. Suddenly they're in the picture and we're, what? On the sidelines? Is that how it feels, she asked, her voice even. To be on the sidelines? They didn't answer. She leaned forward just slightly, elbows on her knees. Tell me, where were you when I turned 70? Or when the water heater exploded and Hazel stayed here 3 nights to help me clean up? Marcus opened his mouth, closed it again. Eleanor's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. If you loved me as much as you loved what I had, you'd have come for cake. David flinched like she'd slapped him. Marcus's jaw tightened. That's not fair. No, she said. It's not. But it's true. They stood there, words piling up in their throats, but none of them useful. No apologies. No real questions about how she was. Just tension dressed up as concern. David gestured toward the hallway, like geography might change her mind. So what? You're cutting us out completely? After everything? She stood slowly. After everything, she repeated. I finally realized that love is not a currency. It's not owed or banked or leveraged. Marcus stepped closer. We're still your sons. That used to mean more to me than it did to you, she said, eyes steady. Now I think we're just 3 people with a shared history and different values. David's mouth twisted. So Rachel gets the legacy. Hazel gets the keys. We get, what? A lecture. Eleanor's smile was faint, tired. You get a chance to reflect. Whether you take it is up to you. The silence between them thickened. And then David turned for the door, fast, shoulders high, jaw tight. Marcus lingered for a second longer, something flickering in his expression. Regret, maybe, or confusion masquerading as pain. He looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't. He followed David out. The door clicked shut. Eleanor stood there a moment, letting the quiet settle again. Not peace, but progress. Hazel emerged from the hallway like a ghost coming in from backstage. I stayed out of sight, she said. Didn't want to spook the performance. Eleanor exhaled slowly. Hazel reached over and squeezed her hand. You left them speechless. Good start. Eleanor nodded. And then her phone buzzed. Unknown number, voicemail. Hazel looked at her. Same number? Eleanor nodded and hit play. It was a man's voice, panicked, slightly slurred. You don't know what you've done. They're not who you think they are. You're not safe. Not from them. Not from... Click. Call ended. The notary's office sat tucked between a closed-down pharmacy and a storefront church. No frills. Just beige walls, a paper tray full of pens, and a single dying pothos plant clinging to life on the windowsill. Eleanor sat across from the notary, a woman barely 30 with a practiced smile and a quiet reverence for signatures. Hazel sat nearby, watching with folded arms, legs crossed at the ankle, like someone who had learned long ago how to wait without rushing the moment. The papers were neatly stacked. 4 signatures, 3 initials, 1 irrevocable change. Take your time, the notary said, sliding the folder across the desk. No rush. Eleanor nodded and picked up the pen. Her hand was steady, stronger than it had felt in weeks. The ink flowed with finality. She signed each line like a door closing. Hazel watched her with something between pride and awe. When it was done, the notary added her seal with a practiced thump and click. Congratulations, she said. It's official now. Eleanor didn't smile, but she nodded, a quiet exhale leaving her as if something inside had finally been released. Something that had clung too long. Rachel waited in the parking lot, engine idling, hair pulled into a quick bun, and paint still dotting her knuckles. She jumped out when she saw them, opened the passenger door, and cleared a sketchbook from the seat. I wasn't sure how long it would take, she said. But I thought you might want the ride. I did, Eleanor said, easing into the car. Thank you. Hazel waved them off and got into her own car, leaving them with a grin and a parting line. Don't go robbing any banks on the way home. Rachel pulled onto the road, the sky stretching wide above them, October blue, sharp and clean. The kind of sky that made it easier to breathe. They drove in easy silence for a few blocks before Rachel spoke. You look different today, she said. Oh? Not tired, not heavy. Eleanor looked out the window. That's what happens when you stop carrying guilt. Rachel nodded slowly. I don't know what you did in there, but I can tell it was brave. Eleanor smiled. Let's just say I stopped giving things to people who only remember me when they need something. Rachel glanced at her. That couldn't have been easy. It wasn't, she said, but it was right. They pulled into the driveway just as the wind picked up, leaves swirling across the yard like gold and rust-colored confetti. As Rachel turned off the car, Eleanor looked at her, really looked. At the warmth in her face, the way she didn't rush silence, the quiet, unknowing gratitude of someone who still believed people could be good. You're good company, Rachel, Rachel grinned. So are you. They walked inside together. Eleanor didn't offer tea this time. She didn't need to. Rachel went straight to the cabinet, grabbed 2 mugs, and filled the kettle. She belonged here, whether she knew it yet or not. Later that evening, Eleanor sat with Hazel in the living room. The lights were low. A quiet jazz record played on the old turntable, the vinyl whispering between notes like it was catching its breath. Hazel tucked her feet under her and sipped cider. You're lighter these days, she said. I can feel it. I think I am, Eleanor said. She touched the edge of the fireplace mantel like it might answer back. It's strange how heavy regret gets when you carry it too long. You forget how much space it takes up. Hazel nodded. Let it keep going. I plan to. Outside, Wind scraped along the windows in gentle pushes. The house creaked, but it didn't feel haunted anymore. Just lived in. Just hers. Her phone buzzed on the table. David. Hazel looked over. Eleanor stared at the screen, then tapped it open. Thinking about coming by Sunday, just to talk. If you'll have me, she read it twice. No threats, no entitlement. Just that. Hazel said nothing, waited. Eleanor placed the phone face down and said, "Let's see if thinking about it is the same as showing up." Eleanor didn't set the table. She didn't polish the flatware, didn't light the candles, didn't fold napkins into hopeful triangles or lay out cake plates just in case. Sunday arrived cold and gray, and she let it. The living room was lit only by the soft shimmer of rain against the windows and the orange blink of the fireplace pilot light. Her coffee sat untouched. Her phone, silenced and turned face down. She stood barefoot in the den, the floor beneath her splattered with specks of vermilion and charcoal, brushes soaking in a jar of murky water on the old table by the wall. The canvas in front of her was nearly full, deep, jagged swipes of crimson, streaked with violet and raw sienna. The color bled like memory. She hadn't painted in years. Not seriously. Not like this. She dipped the brush again, thick with red, the kind of red that didn't explain itself, and pulled it down the middle of the canvas like a wound. The knock at the door didn't startle her. She left the brush in the jar and walked calmly through the hall. When she opened the door, Rachel stood there with a Tupperware container cradled in her hands and hair curled damp at the ends. "I brought soup," she said. "Hazel said you probably hadn't eaten." "I haven't." Eleanor stepped aside. "Come in." Rachel kicked off her boots and walked to the kitchen like she'd lived there once. She set the soup on the stove and stirred without asking. Her back to the room, the soft scrape of the ladle, the only sound between them. "I was going to ask if today was a quiet day," she said finally. "But I think I already know." Eleanor leaned against the doorway. "He didn't come." Rachel turned. "Do you want to talk about it?" "No," Eleanor said. "I want to paint." Rachel smiled gently. "Then paint." They ate in silence, bowls of lentil and sweet potato, hot and steady. Eleanor's fingers were stained with pigment, but she didn't bother washing them before eating. She liked the way the color stayed, the way it clung. When they finished, she led Rachel into the den. The canvas stood like a mirror turned inside out. Rachel studied it with her arms folded, mouth slightly open. "It's intense," she said. "It's what being forgotten looks like," Eleanor said softly. Rachel tilted her head. "Then paint what remembering feels like." Eleanor looked at her, really looked. She saw the child Rachel had once been, quiet, curious, always asking questions that felt too old for her age. And she saw the woman she'd become, one who showed up without being asked, who stirred soup when the silence got too heavy, who didn't leave when the hard parts came out. Eleanor stepped back to the canvas. She dipped her brush into gold. The hours passed like breath. They didn't speak much. Rachel stayed, perched on the arm of the couch, sketching something Eleanor didn't ask to see. The house didn't creak the way it usually did. It watched them, it listened. Outside, dusk crept in early, pressing gray against the windows. Still, no knock. No car in the driveway. No apology text. No follow-up. Eleanor didn't check her phone. She didn't need to. Hazel arrived just before 6, letting herself in with a soft hello from the foyer. "We're in here," Rachel called. Hazel appeared. Cheeks flushed, scarf damp from the drizzle. She saw the painting first, her breath catching slightly. Then she looked at Eleanor. "You didn't set the table." "No," Eleanor said. "I didn't." Hazel smiled. "Good." Rachel stood and stretched. "I should go. I've got a commission due tomorrow and no idea how to finish it." "Take your time," Eleanor said, gesturing to the wet canvas. Rachel grinned. "You too." She left with the kind of goodbye that didn't need promises attached. Hazel and Eleanor sat down in the quiet. "I thought about baking today," Eleanor said after a while, "but I realized I was only doing it in case he came." Hazel's voice was soft. "And now I bake when I'm hungry." The fire clicked softly behind them. Hazel nodded toward the painting. "What's the gold?" Eleanor looked at it. The gold ribbon cutting through the red, like memory rising from the wreckage. Hope, she said. Or something like it. Hazel smiled. It's beautiful. Eleanor didn't answer, but her eyes stayed on the gold. Later that night, long after Hazel had gone home, Eleanor finally turned her phone face up. No missed calls, but one unread text from Rachel. You taught me how to look for light. I just wanted you to know I see yours. Eleanor stared at the message until her eyes blurred. Then, finally, she picked up her brush again and dipped it in gold. Hazel didn't knock. She walked in with a laptop tucked under one arm and a look on her face that had nothing to do with weather or groceries. The door swung closed behind her, soft but certain. Eleanor, she called, you need to see this. Eleanor glanced up from the table, where a shallow bowl of apples sat untouched beside a still warm mug of tea. The gold on her fingers had faded to a dull shimmer, but she hadn't scrubbed it off. Hazel opened the laptop and turned it toward her. A social media post glowed on the screen. Marcus's page, a group photo. Marcus, David, their families. A backyard barbecue. Laughing, red plastic cups. A cake in the center. The caption read, Family First. Grateful for the ones who never change. Eleanor's eyes scanned the photo once, then again, until she spotted it. The frame on the table behind Marcus. Her wedding photo, the one that used to sit in her hallway. Crooked now. Cropped by accident or design. Her face barely visible in the corner. Faded into shadow. He really did that? Hazel asked quietly. Eleanor didn't blink. He's been editing me for years. Hazel sat across from her, folding her arms. That was your photo, your memory. Eleanor nodded slowly. Not anymore, not to him. She closed the laptop. The rain tapped at the windows again, not urgent, just present, like it had nowhere else to be. That night, Eleanor painted with the windows open and the lights dimmed. The house smelled like turpentine and damp leaves. She moved in silence, sleeves rolled to the elbows, her hair twisted up with a pencil she'd forgotten was there. This canvas was smaller, not angry, not loud, just deliberate. She dragged a flat brush through pools of indigo and ash, creating depth where red had once been. There was no figure, no face, just absence, shaped by layers, space carved out of space. Rachel arrived without knocking, barefoot in the hallway like she was walking into a memory. She stood behind Eleanor, watching for a long moment before saying, That's power. Eleanor didn't turn. It's memory, the kind that doesn't ask permission. Rachel stepped closer. I saw the post. Hazel texted it to me. I'm sorry. I'm not. Eleanor laid the brush down gently. It's who they are. Now I know. The room fell into silence again, the kind Eleanor had once dreaded, but this one was different. It didn't close around her. It gave her room to breathe. She looked down at her hands, stained, veined, steady. I thought maybe if I was small enough, she said, they'd remember to see me. Rachel shook her head. You were never small. They just needed you to be. The words sat in the room for a while, then drifted up into the corners where the dust didn't go. The email from Warren came the next morning. Subject: Confirmation of legal revisions. The Whitlock estate, all modifications to your will, trust, and power of attorney have been reviewed and filed with the county registrar. Copies enclosed. The changes are final and binding. If you have any questions, I remain at your service. Eleanor read it once through, then again. She opened the attached PDFs, scanned her own signature, her name written in clean, decisive ink. She printed 2 copies, placed one in the fireproof lockbox, and left the other on her desk beneath a paperweight Rachel had once made. Glass-encased forget-me-nots set in resin. Hazel called an hour later. You get it? I did. And? It's done. There was a pause, then Hazel's voice again, warm but edged with something that sounded like pride. Then so are they. That evening, Eleanor stood in the garage, looking through the last unopened box from the back shelf. Inside, buried under yellowing news clippings and old tax forms, she found it. A framed photo of her and John from their trip to Montana. She was mid-laugh, mouth open, wind in her hair. He was looking at her, not the camera. Uncropped, unedited, whole. She wiped the glass clean, then carried it inside. On her way to the mantel, her phone buzzed once on the counter. David. Just one line. We saw the changes. Is this really what you want? She didn't open it. She didn't need to. Instead, she placed the photo above the fireplace, centered, upright, real. He came alone. No heads up, no warning text. Just the soft scrape of tires on gravel and a knock that didn't demand. Eleanor opened the door slowly. The porch light caught on his face. David's. No jacket this time. Just a button-down shirt, sleeves wrinkled at the cuffs. He looked older than last week. Or maybe she'd just stopped rounding his edges in her memory. Can I come in? He asked. Eleanor didn't answer right away. Then, a minute. No more. David stepped inside like the floor might crack beneath him. He didn't go far, just stood by the front window, staring at the painting she'd finished 2 nights ago, midnight blues and streaks of ash and gold. Memory pressed into canvas. I remember when you painted the one with the windmill, he said. Back when we still had that old barn. You let me help. You spilled linseed oil on the carpet, she said, tone flat. I covered for you. His smile ghosted, then fell. I was hoping we could talk. You're talking, Eleanor said. I'm listening. David's jaw worked. He rubbed the back of his neck like the words lived in there, cramped and bitter. I made mistakes, he said. I should have called more. I should have come sooner. I got wrapped up in work, in the house, in the kids. I didn't realize how far I'd let things slide. Eleanor watched him quietly. I thought there'd always be more time, he added. I thought you'd understand. She moved past him toward the kitchen table and sat down. Her chair creaked gently beneath her. Family, she said softly, shows up when it matters. You didn't. His eyes flicked toward her, wet now, pink-rimmed. That boyish look he used to wear when he scraped his knees or broke a vase. Regret, genuine, but late, like a note that missed the rhythm. I'm sorry, he said, voice cracking. I didn't mean to make you feel erased. I didn't even know Marcus had posted that photo until Hazel sent it. I told him to take it down. Eleanor looked at him, really looked. His shoulders slumped, his hands shook slightly, and yet, this apology, even now, hovered like it was asking for something. I'm not changing the will, she said. I know. I'm not undoing what I've healed. David nodded, swallowing hard. I didn't come for that. I came because you're my mother, and I want to try, even if I don't deserve another chance. Eleanor rose slowly and walked toward him. For a moment, neither moved. Then she pulled him into a hug. He broke, arms around her, his breath ragged and hot against her shoulder. She held him, not for him, but for herself. Because she had the strength now to offer comfort without collapsing into it. And then just as gently, she let go. David stepped back, blinking. Thank you, he whispered. Eleanor nodded, hand already resting on the doorknob. It's late, she said. He got the message. As he stepped outside, Hazel appeared at the edge of the porch. She'd pulled up quietly, standing near the hydrangea bushes with a scarf wrapped high on her neck, and that steady expression that saw through everything. David offered her a tight nod as he passed. She didn't nod back. When the door clicked shut, Hazel stepped inside. Well, she asked. He cried, Eleanor said, almost dryly. Then, quieter. He meant it. Hazel narrowed her eyes. And? I didn't cave. Hazel smiled. That's not cold, that's strength. Eleanor turned back toward the house. The light from the kitchen spilling across the hardwood like a trail. It's peace, she said. And for the first time in a long while, she meant it. The papers were waiting in the envelope, thick and final, the kind of paper that whispered as it moved. Eleanor sat at the dining table with the envelope open beside her. A thin gold pen rested atop the documents. Hazel's idea. If you're going to rewrite your legacy, she'd said, you should at least do it in style. The room was quiet, no music this time. Just the soft hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the antique clock on the wall, its rhythm even and certain. The trust was simple in its language, but its weight lived between the lines. Beneficiary, Rachel Naomi Levine. Directive, full ownership of the Whitlock estate. With dedicated funding for a community arts program in the decedent's name. Eleanor pressed the pen to paper. Her hand didn't tremble. Eleanor May Whitlock date. October 17th. At the bottom of the final page, she paused. Beside the program's name, Hazel's suggestion again, was the title in crisp, clean type. The Price of Memory, a Foundation for Enduring Art. She exhaled slowly, like her lungs had been waiting for this signature to make room. Hazel arrived an hour later with a bottle of sparkling cider and a grin sharp enough to cut tension. "So," she said, holding up 2 flutes. "It's done," Eleanor said. "All of it." Hazel popped the cork like it was champagne. They toasted by the kitchen sink, mugs swapped for crystal flutes. Hazel insisted on borrowing from Eleanor's wedding set. A quiet rebellion in itself. "To peace," Hazel said. Eleanor raised her glass. "To rewriting." They clinked, and the fizz sang in their ears. "You rewrote your ending," Hazel added. "And for once, it isn't a tragedy." Eleanor smiled. "Not yet." Hazel raised a brow. "You planning on a dramatic third act?" "Always." Rachel still didn't know. The papers sat in Warren's hands now, tucked away in an office drawer, set to activate when time and breath made room. Eleanor didn't want to thank you. She didn't want tears or vows or legacy speeches. She wanted Rachel to live. That was enough. The lake that afternoon was still and unbothered. Gray clouds stretched low above the tree line, their bellies heavy but not yet breaking. Eleanor and Hazel stood by the edge, the worn dock creaking faintly beneath them. Hazel held the small bouquet. Eleanor had picked the flowers herself, wild and mismatched. Dandelion, blue aster, 2 orange zinnias from the garden. No arrangements, no ribbons, just what was growing. "This where you want to be when the time comes?" Hazel asked quietly. Eleanor didn't answer right away. Then she took the flowers, stepped forward, and let them go. The bouquet drifted slowly across the water, the petals trembling with the wind. "I don't think I care where I end up," she said, "but I care what I leave behind." The lake rippled as the bouquet moved outward, soft rings expanding across the surface. "You did good," Hazel said. Eleanor smiled faintly. "You helped." The air smelled like rain, sharp and earthy, the kind that carried weight before it ever fell. They stood together for a long moment. Then Hazel slid her arm through Eleanor's. "You ready to head back?" Eleanor didn't look away from the lake. "Not yet." The message came mid-morning, tucked between a dentist reminder and a coupon for garden mulch. "David. Maybe we could reset things. Start fresh. Family's complicated, but I'd like to try again. No pressure. Just think about it." Eleanor stared at it for a long moment, not because it surprised her, but because it didn't. She read it twice, then typed her reply without hesitation. "I wish you peace, David. No ellipses, no apology, no invitation. Just that." She hit send, then closed the thread. Rachel arrived an hour later with a large canvas wrapped in a faded bedsheet and a cinnamon bun she'd baked herself. Slightly overdone, edges crisp, icing pooled in the corners. "Trade you art for sugar," she said, stepping inside. "Done," Eleanor replied. Already reaching for a plate, they moved into the den, where the light was soft and forgiving. Eleanor had cleared a space on the wall above the bookshelf, empty now, waiting. Rachel set the canvas on the floor and peeled back the sheet. Eleanor studied the painting. It was hers, bold red base, threaded with gold. Lines pulled gently across the surface like a memory traced back into existence. She'd finished it the night after the lake, when sleep wouldn't come and peace needed somewhere to go. "This one's called Remembered," she said. Rachel tilted her head. "Perfect name." Hazel appeared in the doorway, arms full of fresh-smelling laundry. "Name for what?" "The new one," Rachel said, gesturing to the canvas. Hazel leaned in, then broke into a grin. "That's so you." "You say that like it's a warning," Eleanor said, dry as ever. Hazel placed the laundry on the chair. "No, I say it like it's a signature." That Saturday, Eleanor stood in the sunlit art room of the old community center. It smelled like tempera paint, pencil shavings, and the unmistakable sharpness of clean canvas. Tables were scattered with water cups, rags, and trays of color. A group of 6 sat around her, 2 teenagers, a grandmother who whispered everything, a quiet man with gentle hands, a mother and daughter who looked more like sisters. "I'm not here to teach you how to copy," Eleanor said, chalk in hand. I'm here to help you remember what feeling looks like. She drew a circle on the board. Painting is remembering without permission, she added. So go ahead, break the rules. The room filled with color, with movement, with the soft rustle of brushes across surfaces and the low murmur of people surprised by themselves. Eleanor walked slowly between tables, not correcting, just encouraging. She paused beside the grandmother, whose entire page was covered in different shades of blue. Is it a sky? Eleanor asked gently. The woman shook her head. It's grief. Eleanor nodded once. Then it's right. From the corner, someone laughed. The mother and daughter were teasing each other over the shape of a tree. Rachel leaned against the back wall, sketchbook in hand, observing like always, half student, half anchor. Hazel walked in quietly with a tray of lemonade and a crooked smile. Do we charge extra for this joy, or is it included? Eleanor smiled as she wiped her hands on a towel. First workshop's free, but if they want wisdom, that'll cost them. Hazel set the tray down and raised her glass. To what exactly? Eleanor paused, thinking, not about the past, but the moment. To laughter, she said. Finally, louder than waiting. They clinked their glasses. That night, Eleanor sat in her studio, window open, crickets singing into the dark. She flipped through old sketchbooks. Some pages were empty, some were chaotic, others looked like her, or at least the woman she was still becoming. She found one from 20 years ago, watercolor on textured paper, a house, a single yellow light in the window, the name scrawled below it, Home, Someday. She ran her fingers over the edge. It had never won awards. No one had framed it. But here it was, still intact, still real. Just like her. She picked up her pen and wrote something new beneath the old title. Found it. The cafe was half full. The kind of late morning lull where espresso machines hummed low and sunlight leaned lazily through streaked windows. Eleanor stirred her tea even though she didn't take sugar, just to have something to do with her hands. The journalist arrived 5 minutes late, hair damp from drizzle, a notepad already open. Mrs. Whitlock, thank you for meeting me. It's Eleanor, she said. Mrs. Whitlock belonged to another life. He smiled, tentative. Right, Eleanor, I appreciate your time. I read about the Price of Memory Foundation and wanted to highlight it for the local paper. You've built something unusual. Most people don't create legacies until someone else writes their obituary. Eleanor looked out the window. The clouds above the square were low and steady. I wasn't trying to build anything. I was trying to stop waiting. He leaned forward. And the student you left the estate to, Rachel Levine, you taught her years ago? I did, Eleanor said. She was 11, painted like she was trying to make the world apologize for being dull. The journalist smiled. You know, this is a rare story. A retired teacher leaving her house, her savings, to a former student. That's not something we see every day. Some people will call it unconventional. Eleanor's eyes lifted to meet his. Caring usually is. He hesitated. Would you say it's an act of punishment? For your sons? She laughed, not cruelly, but as if he'd just missed the entire point. I'm not punishing anyone, she said softly. I'm rewarding care. The pen paused mid-scratch. Would you like me to quote that? Yes, she said, word for word. By evening, the article was everywhere. Local teacher honors former student in final will. I'm rewarding care. It started as a community piece, tucked between election coverage and a story about a record pumpkin at the county fair. But people read it, then shared it, then argued about it. Eleanor's photo, the one Rachel had taken of her holding a paintbrush, hair silver in the afternoon light, sat beside the headline. Hazel read it out loud on her phone while stirring a pot of soup in Eleanor's kitchen. You just gave every neglected parent in this town a battle cry, she said, laughing under her breath. Rewarding care. It's already a hashtag. Eleanor shook her head. That wasn't the point. Doesn't matter, Hazel said, pointing the spoon at her. You've started a revolution, the quiet kind, with aprons and backbone. Eleanor chuckled. I didn't plan to be anyone's example. Exactly why you are. They both laughed, the sound spilling out past the curtains into the yard, where the air smelled of soil and oncoming rain. When the laughter faded, Eleanor sat down, the printed article folded neatly in her hands. There was pride there, small, reluctant, but something gentler underneath. "Do you think they've read it?" she asked. Hazel knew who they were. "Of course," she said. "They just won't say they did." And she was right. David and Marcus stayed silent online. No calls, no comments, just stillness. The same kind of silence they'd always chosen, only heavier now that the world had noticed what it cost. But Rachel called. It was late, almost midnight. When Eleanor's phone buzzed against the nightstand, she almost didn't answer, but the name on the screen glowed soft and familiar. Rachel. Her voice was thick, tear-streaked. "I didn't know. Eleanor, I read the article. I had no idea you—" "It wasn't for attention," Eleanor said gently. "I know," Rachel whispered. "That's why I can't stop crying." Eleanor smiled in the dark. "Don't cry for me, sweetheart. Just keep painting." "I will," Rachel said. "But why me?" "Because you showed up," Eleanor said simply. "That's all love really is." Silence stretched across the line, not empty this time, but full. Rachel sniffed. "Then I'll make sure the world remembers you right." Eleanor looked across the dim room, at the painting hung above the mantel, red, gold, steady. "No," she said softly. "Just remember yourself." They said goodnight, but neither hung up for a while. The line hummed quietly between them. Two lives tethered by something that didn't need permission anymore. Later, Eleanor stepped outside onto the porch. The night air carried the scent of wet grass and cedar. Across the yard, the motion light flicked on, a fox cutting through the dark, silent and certain. She lifted her eyes toward the sky. The clouds had finally broken, and in the quiet shimmer of stars above her, she felt it, not victory, not relief, but recognition. Her story, at last, had stopped asking to be rewritten. The voicemails were still there, 7 of them, some from unknown numbers, some from David. One, likely Marcus. None of them listened to. Eleanor never pressed play, not once. She had long ago stopped handing her piece over to people who only spoke when they sensed the ground shifting beneath them. Instead, she opened her desk drawer and pulled out a single sheet of letterhead from Warren's office. She wrote in smooth, slanted cursive, "Warren, please consider everything final. No changes." Eleanor, she folded the note cleanly, sealed it in an envelope, and clipped it to the original file. Then she turned her chair toward the window and let the sunlight stretch across her lap like a warm reminder. You chose this. Rachel arrived just after lunch, balancing a wide bouquet of sunflowers in one hand and a tote bag full of papers in the other. "Crowded studio today," she said, as Eleanor opened the door. One kid painted a dragon eating the concept of time. He didn't even blink when he said it. Eleanor laughed and stepped back to let her in. A prodigy, clearly. They sat in the living room while the kettle hissed quietly from the kitchen. Rachel spread a stack of sketches across the coffee table. Bold work, daring palettes, notes scribbled in the corners like secrets. "I tell them about you sometimes," Rachel said. "Not your name, just the woman who reminded me I was worth showing up for." Eleanor blinked once, then again. "That woman sounds very wise." "She's terrifying," Rachel said, "and also the reason half my students now paint without outlines." They both laughed, open, easy. The sunflowers rested on the mantel beside the painting Rachel had once called perfect. Eleanor didn't argue. Hazel showed up 30 minutes later with a pie still warm from the oven and no explanation for how she managed it. "Don't ask," she said. "Just eat." They took it out to the porch, sliced it open under a sky just beginning to bruise toward dusk. Birds shifted in the hedges. Wind danced with the chimes. Everything smelled like cinnamon and old trees. They didn't talk about suns, or silence, or anything that had been taken. They talked about recipes, paint, Rachel's latest crush on the barista who spelled her name wrong every time and somehow made it cute. The laughter came easy now, full-bellied, unapologetic. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, pie plate balanced on one knee, cider in her hand. "For the first time," she said, looking out across the yard, "I'm not waiting for anyone." Hazel looked at her. "You're not," Rachel smiled. "And you're more fun now, honestly." Eleanor raised her glass. "Then here's to finally being late to everything but myself." Later, when the house was quiet again, Eleanor walked to the den. She turned on the floor lamp. The light slid across the painting that still hung above the bookcase, the one she had nearly hidden, then decided to honor. Remembered, it was red, gold, and something else now. Something earned. She stared at it for a long time, then leaned in, close enough that the brushstrokes revealed themselves, tiny imperfections, quiet truths. She whispered to no one and everything at once. Perfect. There was no fanfare, no final moment to mark what changed. No one saw her light the last candle of the evening or close the curtains before the night fell in, but she knew. She knew this was the end of something, and not the kind she feared. The next morning, she opened a blank page in her journal and began writing. Her handwriting was slow, steady, and certain. I sat alone on my 70th birthday. Both my sons didn't bother to show up. The next morning, I rewrote my will and left everything to someone who actually remembered me. She underlined the last 3 words, then set the pen down and smiled, not because she was finished, but because for once, she didn't need to start over.